From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up today on AgDay, we hit the hardwood where a little movie history is kept alive in a small Indiana town. There's no deal yet, but the president continues to sound optimistic about trade negotiations with China.
The China meeting was a big success.
As concerns grow about ASF.
It's going to have an impact on all proteins globally.
AgDay, presented by the all-new Chevy Silverado, the strongest, most advanced Silverado ever.
Good morning, I'm Betsy Gibbon in for Clinton. U.S. pork producers are heading to Capitol Hill this week to urgently voice concerns about African swine fever as China reports another case of ASF. More than 100 pork producers are heading to Washington for a conference. The goal is to get Congress to add 600 more ag inspectors at U.S. borders and customs like airports and seaports to make sure ASF does not enter the country. USDA and the National Pork Producers Council have been stepping up efforts on home soil, strengthening border security, and even adding 60 more Beagle teams on the border since March. Reuters reporting the latest case of ASF located in southwestern province of Yunnan, which is tacked onto more than 100 cases since August. Analysts say the news in China could go as far as impact the U.S. poultry and beef market.
Beef is absolutely needs to be incorporated in that discussion. When you talk the 50% of the global hog supply being in China, and we're seeing discussion of production levels down in the 20 to 30% bracket, it's going to have an impact on all proteins globally.
Close anticipates the Chinese will cut their consumption of domestic pork and fears ASF could impact humans, even though veterinarians say ASF is not a threat to humans. Many hoped at the end of last week President Trump would announce a date for a signing summit with China for a trade agreement. Instead, no summit was announced. But both President Trump and Chinese leaders say major progress on the final text for an agreement has been made. The president saying we'll know more over the next 4 weeks whether a deal can be reached. Why so long? Our Washington insiders say U.S. negotiators have told industry officials that even after reaching a preliminary deal, they will need an additional 2 weeks beyond that to review the fine print. The president saying some of the toughest things in the deal have been agreed to, but confirming enforcement provisions of any possible deal remain a sticking point with China.
I think we're going to have we have a very good relationship. We're going to see. I don't want to predict a deal or not a deal, but we're very well along. We've really negotiated probably the two hardest points very successfully for our country.
The president also saying last week, whether it's farmers or technology, people, all of them will be happy. And he said China is going to be very happy too. China has been buying U.S. pork despite the heavy tariffs on it. And earlier this month, we saw 1.6 million metric tons of flash sales to China of U.S. soybeans. And that should be good news, right? But USDA World Agricultural Outlook Board Chairman Seth Meyer says not necessarily. With the soybean purchase here and there by China, it may actually breed more uncertainty in markets.
Because will those commitments grow? Will they promise to buy more? Will more get put on the books? Will it start to move? Does it happen this year? Does it get rolled to next year? And even then, it's less than they've taken in previous years. And propping up that price a little bit, it makes it more difficult at this time of the year for us. We're trying to compete with the Brazilians in their part of the marketing year. So if the Chinese bid that price up a little bit, it makes it more difficult for us to sell to the rest of the world.
Meyer says the buys also make it harder to forecast the soybean market situation. States are continuing to tally up the damage caused by flooding last month. The Iowa Farm Bureau Federation now saying the state's economic damage will likely surpass $2 billion. Farmers in Iowa will struggle to plant as many as 145,000 flooded acres along the Missouri River. Some are concerned right now about the toll the flooding could take on people in the farming industry.
When you've lost everything you've built up, over your lifetime and your career, it really does, you go through an extreme sense of loss and grief. just as well as how I'm going to take care of my family. And so, folks can just feel really overwhelmed. And, even for those who've maybe they've not lost everything, but they've lost, a good chunk of it or some really important things, as they come back and try to rebuild, it's exhausting. And when you're tired physically, that also can take a huge toll on your emotional well-being as well. When we look at 6 months, 8 months, a year down the road, that's when we get really concerned about high rates of depression and high rates of suicide, actually.
As for disaster aid, an impasse continues in Congress. At the moment, it is stalled over an issue of special aid for Puerto Rico. But ag leaders say they are working on it and hoping for a compromise in a short period of time. Almost all of California is now drought-free, and it's starting to show. The California Department of Water Resources conducting the latest snow survey of the year. The survey recording over 106 inches of snow depth and snow water equivalent to 51 inches. That's 200% of the average for the location statewide. The Sierra Nevada snowpack is 162% of average.
Our April survey is very significant because this is typically when we see the deepest snowpack with the most water content.
On average, the Sierra snowpack supplies about 30% of California's water needs. In today's crop comments, meteorologist Mike Hoffman has a unique proposal on the farm.
Thanks, Betsy. Well, check this out. This picture coming to us from the UK in the town of Pembrokeshire in Wales. It was shared by Cyan Thomas on Twitter, and you see what he's done here, asking Alice if she'll marry him with a little help from one of his cows. Now, people couldn't help but respond, calling it, quote, pretty moving and cowgratulations. By the way, Cyan says Alice did say yes, which is the important thing. Now, taking a look at the drought monitor, well, drought's not really a big issue in most parts of the country. Parts of South Texas, parts of the Southeast, parts of the Four Corner region and Northwest have some issues there, but boy, that's very little drought for this time of the year for the lower 48. I'll have more on your forecast coming up, but first, here are some hometown temps.
Introducing Farm Journal TV, on demand 24/7. AgDay, Machinery Pete TV. U.S. Farm Report on your phone and tablet. Download the Farm Journal TV mobile app today.
Here's an event growers can take part in. It's free and you don't even have to leave your home. Farm Journal is hosting a webinar this coming Wednesday, April 10th. Hear from the lead offering manager of agribusiness solutions at the Weather Company. He'll talk about the digital end of farming, about how artificial intelligence in the field can help meet increasing consumer demands. The webinar kicks off Wednesday at 1 o'clock Central Time. To sign up, head to agday.com and click on the link. Tariffs. What could happen to the market in the future if they stay or if they go? We have some analysis coming up. And later, we hit the hardwood for a trip back in time.
AgDay, brought to you by new Delaro fungicide for corn and soybeans. Achieve personal best yields.
After a rally on Thursday, grains and livestock moved into the red. The lack of a trade deal still with China, still weighing on investors' minds. Here's more now from the CME.
Today in the livestock market, we had a lot of action with cattle starting out lower. It spent most of the day there. There's very little cash trade, and in the south, the cash actually traded lower just a little bit that we did see. It pressured a lot of the futures, and we were expecting that there was going to be a real recovery imminent, here at the end of the week, because the expectation is some things are going to be looking better next week, but it didn't really happen. Although it did, there was a little bit of a tell in the feeders, because the feeders did end up coming back. So we have the feeders as mixed today. The futures did rebound off that initial fall. It sent it a little bit lower. This just tells us that there's some optimism on the horizon, and for next week already everyone is looking for some real demand, and grilling season is here, and they're expecting that there's going to be a lot more happening seasonally, and that's going to give the market back another boost.
The tariff tiff still weighing on minds of members of Congress as they debate the USMCA deal. Ted Morgan looks into what the ongoing tariff battle could mean for the markets.
Here now is Scott Brown of the University of Missouri. And Dr. Brown, a lot of talk last week about these tariffs when it comes to USMCA and the tariffs' impact on maybe ratifying this final agreement. In fact, some senators coming out and asking the president to remove these tariffs. How big of a detriment are these tariffs to commodity prices right now when you look at exports?
I think you can look no further than pork markets to kind of get a sense of how important they are. Ham prices here in the United States were much lower as a result of the 25% tariff. And so I think getting rid of those tariffs gives us an opportunity to move more pork to Mexico at higher values. It was both so when you look at exports last year, we were roughly flat in terms of U.S. pork exports, yet on a value basis we were down. And I'll say we're down on that value basis in part due to the tariffs in place.
So what is it going to take to remove the tariffs?
I'm not sure at this point. Whether we get those tariffs removed with a successful USMCA, I guess is left to be seen. But for U.S. agriculture, getting those tariffs out of the way certainly gives us a more open marketplace.
And right now, with those tariffs in place, how concerned are you about the tariffs and the continued impact it could have on exports?
Yeah, I do worry about as we look forward here in 2019, that in pork in particular, where I think we've seen the biggest impacts from the tariffs that are in place. If those don't go away, I think pork markets may have already thought once we had a successful USMCA, those tariffs would go away. And so markets, I think, have built in some stronger pork exports to Mexico. And if that doesn't unfold, again, with a 4% increase in pork production this year, we need to move product in many places, and Mexico is one.
So there's a lot of hope that maybe because of African swine fever, we'll see China import more pork. But if we see that happen, yet we don't see these tariffs removed, do you think that that actually ends up hurting pork prices?
I suppose it could to some extent. I will always say China is potentially a much bigger situation. We don't really know how that's going to play out with African swine fever in China, but if we were to talk about substantial imports of pork into China as a result of that outbreak, I think that will dominate pork markets in 2019.
All right, Dr. Brown, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll have a check of weather right here on AgDay.
Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
Welcome back to AgDay with meteorologist Mike Hoffman. Mike, when you look at the estimated rain for last week, it looks like the flooded areas in the Midwest did not receive much, but they will receive some this week,
Yeah, I'm
won't
probably
they?
going above normal for a good chunk of that week. It's still an active weather pattern, but at least we went a week without getting a whole lot of rain in those areas. As you can see, though, the Mississippi Valley kind of got the brunt of the rain, especially down along the Gulf Coast. This is the rain from a week ago Saturday through this past Friday, all estimated from radar, and you can see those heavy amounts. Parts of the area from east of Houston, obviously, over into Louisiana, most of that area, New Orleans into the panhandle of Florida. Some of that was offshore, which is good, but some of that was obviously on land, and you can see even northern Mississippi got a fair amount, and there was one little pocket there, parts of far northern Missouri, southern Iowa, and west central Illinois that ended up with 2 to 3 inches of rainfall. Now, taking a look at the jet stream, this is an active weather pattern. We have a pretty good trough to start the week in the southern Mississippi Valley. That'll move through the southeast. Trough digs into the Great Lakes and the northeast. That won't have a lot of moisture with it. This one, however, will as it comes into the west, and that's going to continue to move east. You can see as we head toward Friday, there's that trough moving off the northeast coast. Heading into next week, another trough moving into the northern plains and another one still in the Pacific Northwest. So temperatures this week below normal. Great Lakes, northern and central plains back to the west. Above normal in the far southeast, far south Texas. And you can see the far northwest and western Canada above normal temperatures. Precipitation for this week expected to be above normal for most of the southwest, the west central and central Rockies, and then right across the plain states into the mid-Atlantic and the northeast below normal up along the Canadian border. Now below normal for a 30-day outlook for the northern plains and the northwest, above normal for the southern tier of states. Then you can see 30-day outlook for precipitation, central plains to the southeast and the western states still expected to be above normal. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. First of all, for El Paso, Texas, lots of sunshine and warm today. High temperature of 85. Duluth, Minnesota, partly sunny, very mild, high up to 58. And Chatsworth, Georgia, cloudy with a shower or thunderstorm around, high around 70.
Up next, we get into the Combine Time Machine with Machinery Pete.
Stick around, folks. Coming up, we're going to have a fun little chat about combines, then and now.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
Machinery Pete digs into the archives with an unique find.
All right, let's talk combines today, folks. Now, before we hop into the latest pricing, why don't you come back in time with me? 45 years to 1974. Now, one of our Machinery Pete social media followers, Danny Kenzel from Missouri, sent this amazing image, a copy of a sales slip his father purchased back on October 11th, 1974, a brand new Gleaner KKS combine, kind of a rare machine, corn and soybean special with a 10-foot header. And you can see the list price on it back then was just over $20,000. And Danny's father traded in his trusty old Gleaner E with a header and got just under $6,600 allowed for that. So tack on some sales tax there, and the bottom line was $13,905 for that transaction. Now, of course, a lot has changed. These combines, they've got so much bigger, more complicated, and of course, the dollars involved today for combines, unbelievable. Now, on an auction last month, March 6th, up in north central North Dakota, our friends at the Steffes Group had a pair of 2017 Case H 9240 combines on one farm auction. Both machines had just over 300 engine hours, and they sold for $330,000 each with no heads. So obviously, a lot has changed in 45 years.
College basketball season may be coming to an end, but the season lives on year-round in one small Indiana town, all thanks to a movie and a little imagination next.
In the Country is powered by Kawasaki. Let the good times roll.
Tonight, the NCAA tournament comes to an end for another year, but basketball lives on year-round, even for those who aren't avid basketball fans, all thanks to an iconic movie. We travel with Andrew McCrae to the land of the Hoosiers.
Many gyms built in the 1920s were torn down years ago. Step inside this one, and you'll quickly see why it's still here.
It was constructed in 1921, the gym for the Knightstown, Indiana High School. But by 1966, when Bob Garner was on the local team, it was to be replaced by a new gym for the school. And this spot was to become a parking lot.
But luckily there was a lady in town, Peg Mayhill, whose son played on that last team with us here in 1966, that did not want to see this gym torn down.
Not only did Peg Mayhill help save the gym, she convinced a movie producer to take a look at it for a basketball movie called Hoosiers. And that's what turned this gym into a shrine.
All it was actually filmed in Knightstown were the Hickory home games and the locker room scenes. Everything else was at different locations around central Indiana.
For the most part, the gym you see in the movie is exactly what it was like when Bob played in 1966. The movie Hoosiers was released in 1987, but it is far from forgotten. In fact, playing a high school game in this gym is a big deal for many teams and their fans.
We had 106 basketball games here this year, 80 of them high school games. We had teams as far away as Mississippi come in and play. Perfect example of the importance of this place. 2 high schools from Mississippi come in to play each other. A 1,000-mile round trip, and 406 fans made the round trip to come for the games.
Not only are these hardwoods iconic,
what I say when it comes to this basketball team is the law.
But it's that locker room that holds a special place in the movie and yet today.
Home team gets their choice of locker rooms, and we've never had anyone not choose what we call the Hickory locker room.
But it's the...
Oh, it's not near as nice as the other one, let's put it that way.
You can come to the gym free of charge and experience it yourself. The court, the stands, the locker room. A chance to be a part of the Hickory Huskers, a team that existed only in a movie, but a team nonetheless that remains in the hearts of many.
No one should come to the gym without shooting a basket. And I kid people that you can't leave on a miss. Even if I have to get a ladder down for you to drop it through, you can't leave on a miss.
Not only can you come here and see a real-life movie set, you even have a chance to hit your own game-winning shot. Traveling the countryside in Nicetown, Indiana, I'm Andrew McCrae.
Great piece, Andrew. Well, that's all the time we have this morning. We're glad you tuned in. For all of us here at AgDay, I'm Betsy Gibbon. Have a great day.